Mugler was once one of the most powerful names in fashion. The shows were wild, the clothes were extreme. And Thierry Mugler's vision? Unlike anything anyone else was doing. But for all the red carpet buzz and celebrity throwbacks today, most people have no idea that Mugler, for a long time, wasn't a fashion brand at all. The runway shut down, the stores closed, and for nearly 20 years, the only thing keeping the name alive was Perfume. It wasn't a scandal, it wasn't a bankruptcy. It just stopped. A brand that had once defined power dressing and futuristic couture vanished. Now it's everywhere again. But the question is, how did a brand this bold collapse so completely? And what exactly are we looking at now? A true revival? Or just nostalgia dressed up as something new? Thierry Mugler didn't come from fashion. He came from performance. Born in Strasbourg in 1948, he trained as a ballet dancer from the age of 14 and spent years on stage with the National Rhine Opera. That background shaped everything. His instinct wasn't just to design clothing, it was to command attention, control a room, and direct a world of his own making. In the early 1970s, Mugler moved to Paris and worked as a window dresser while freelancing for ready-to-wear houses across Europe. By 1973, he launched his first independent collection, Café de Paris, and in 1978, he opened his first boutique at Place des Victoires. What he brought to fashion, and what set him apart immediately, was a vision that didn't care about subtlety. Mugler didn't design for trends, he designed for impact. His work fused science fiction, fetish wear, and old Hollywood glamour into sculptural silhouettes that exaggerated the body, broad shoulders, cinched waists, engineered hips. He used vinyl, latex, chrome, and glass, materials no one else dared to touch in luxury fashion. Women in his world weren't minimalist or soft. They were superheroes, aliens, insects, machines. By the mid-1980s, Mugler had turned his runway shows into full-blown productions. In 1984, for his brand's 10th anniversary, he staged a public runway event at Paris's Zenith Arena, the first time a designer opened a high-fashion show to the public. Over 6,000 people came. It was loud, cinematic, and unapologetically excessive. Many of his most iconic creations emerged during this period. The chrome-plated motorcycle corset worn by Emma Sjoberg and George Michael's Too Funky, the swirling Venus gowns that draped like liquid over the body, and the insect-inspired exoskeleton dresses that transformed models into alien creatures. These weren't clothes. They were characters. The peak came in 1995 with his 20th anniversary haute couture show at the Cirque d'Hiver. Over an hour long with 300 looks and an appearance by James Brown, the show blurred the line between fashion, theater, and concert. Mugler didn't just stage a collection. He built a universe. Off the runway, his influence extended into music and pop culture. He directed the video for George Michael's Too Funky, designed stage looks for David Bowie and Diana Ross, and created the infamous Harley-Davidson corset worn by Beyoncé, and, later, Cardi B. At the time, Mugler's name meant pure power, theatrical, provocative, untouchable. But behind the scenes, the business was another story. Mugler had built a brand on vision, not on wearability, scalability, or commercial logic. His couture was theatrical, expensive, and technically difficult to produce. And by the late 1990s, the fashion landscape had started to shift. Minimalism was on the rise, led by brands like Helmut Lang and Calvin Klein. Mugler's hyper-feminine excess began to look out of step. In 1997, cosmetics giant Clarins bought a controlling stake in the brand. At first, it looked like a strategic move, a partnership that could help stabilize the business. But the results weren't promising. Ready-to-wear sales underperformed. Couture had never been profitable, and Mugler, increasingly disillusioned with the industry, started to pull away from the spotlight. By 2002, he had walked away entirely. Officially, he retired. In interviews, he spoke about feeling limited by fashion, tired of making other people look amazing while feeling creatively boxed in. He wanted to move on. The following year, in 2003, Clarins made the decision to shut down Mugler's fashion operations altogether. The couture atelier closed. The ready-to-wear line was discontinued. The brand's boutiques went dark. It wasn't framed as a collapse, but it effectively was. Mugler, the designer and the label, vanished from the fashion conversation almost overnight. And it didn't make headlines. There was no bankruptcy, no high-profile scandal, just silence. The kind that happens when a business isn't built to scale and the creative engine behind it steps away without a succession plan. Years later, Mugler would reemerge under a new name, Manfred. His appearance was radically changed, shaped by bodybuilding, multiple surgeries, and a total rejection of his old-fashioned persona. He told the New York Times he no longer wanted to be recognized, saying, "You don't want to be reminded that you did this or you did that. It is disturbing." He wasn't interested in legacy. And the fashion world, chasing newer and more marketable talent, didn't chase him either. What remained was a licensed name stamped on perfume bottles, a distant echo of what the brand had once been. The Mugler name may have disappeared from fashion, but it never left the perfume counter. Long before the runway shut down, Thierry Mugler had launched one of the most influential fragrances of the 1990s. Angel, released in 1992, was unlike anything on the market. It didn't smell like flowers or freshness. It smelled like candy. Chocolate, caramel, patchouli. It was the first major gourmand fragrance, and it changed the industry. At first, luxury insiders mocked it. Critics called it vulgar, too sweet, too synthetic. But Angel struck a nerve with consumers. It became a global bestseller, especially in France and Germany, and redefined how fragrance could smell and who it could speak to. This scent, and its follow-up Alien in 2005, would become the financial backbone of the Mugler brand. While the fashion side collapsed, the perfume division thrived, keeping the name alive through licensing, retail deals, and highly produced campaigns. And those campaigns didn't abandon Mugler's visual world. They were cinematic and surreal. Women posed on skyscrapers, draped in shimmering fabric, lit like sci-fi heroines. These weren't ads. They were short films. Even with fashion gone, Mugler's aesthetic lived on through fantasy storytelling and image-making. Mugler himself stayed involved. He helped define the early perfume concepts and later opened workshops to teach scent design and storytelling, treating fragrance as an art form rather than just a product. He once said perfume offered a way to create emotion without form. By the mid-2000s, a strange contradiction had formed. The name Mugler was everywhere, printed on fragrance bottles, stocked in every major department store. And yet, almost an entire generation of consumers had never seen a single Mugler runway show. They knew the scent, not the designer. The perfume had become the brand, and for a while that seemed like the end of the story. But starting in the late 2010s, the Mugler name began to resurface, not through new collections, but through the past. In 2019, the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts debuted Thierry Mugler, Couturissime, a sweeping retrospective that brought his world-building to life through fashion, photography, film, and fragrance. The show toured internationally through 2022, drawing massive crowds in Paris, Rotterdam, and New York. For younger visitors, it was a revelation. Mugler wasn't just a perfume label or red carpet reference. He was a pioneer of fantasy and futurism. His archive wasn't just relevant, it was visionary. In January 2022, just as his legacy was being rediscovered by a new generation, Thierry Mugler passed away at the age of 73. His death didn't come with scandal or decline. It came at a moment of renewed celebration. For many, it felt like an ending Mugler would have approved of, theatrical, larger than life, and full of beauty. Within the fashion world, his influence was rarely questioned. Designers didn't just admire his craftsmanship, they studied it. Mugler's silhouettes, construction, and fearless imagination shaped how generations thought about power, femininity, and performance. At the same time, celebrities like Beyoncé, Cardi B, and Kim Kardashian began pulling archival Mugler looks from the 80s and 90s. These weren't subtle statements. They were chrome corsets, shell-shaped gowns, motorcycle bodices, full-on theatrical pieces, originally made for supermodels and showgirls, now repurposed for viral red carpet moments. Meanwhile, the brand was preparing to re-enter fashion officially. In 2018, Casey Cadwallader was named Creative Director. He was relatively unknown, a designer with stints at Narciso Rodriguez and Acne Studios, but his appointment marked the house's first serious attempt to rebuild its fashion business since shutting down in 2003. Cadwallader's approach was careful. He didn't try to imitate Thierry Mugler's couture-level craftsmanship or his over-the-top showmanship. Instead, he reinterpreted the brand's DNA through a digital-first lens. His collections focused on sculpted, high-gloss pieces, bodysuits, sheer panels, strong shoulders, engineered corsets, all designed for movement, filming, and social media. Instead of traditional runways, Cadwallader staged Mugler's return through short films and hyper-produced digital campaigns. The brand's Spring 2021 video, for example, combined high fashion with stunt choreography and breakneck editing, featuring Bella Hadid, Dominique Jackson, and Alec Weck moving through surreal cityscapes in body-mapped catsuits. These visuals weren't about selling a collection. They were about stopping the scroll. This strategy worked. Mugler gained a new, younger audience on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. People who had never seen a Mugler show live, but knew the brand through filters, reels, and red carpet reels. The name Mugler once again stood for spectacle, but a new kind of spectacle. Still, most of the media coverage focused on archival references and celebrity moments. In the fashion press, there was admiration, but also skepticism. Could the brand build a stable fashion identity, or was it trapped in an endless remix of Thierry's greatest hits? By 2023 and into 2024, Cadwallader began steering the brand in a more grounded direction. The hyper-produced films were still part of the DNA, but the collections themselves started to evolve. His later designs reintroduced strong tailoring, sharp coats, and thoughtful construction, pieces that felt less like internet bait and more like real fashion. Critics noticed. One Paris runway show, held at the historic Le Trianon Theatre, was praised for its restraint and clarity. The lights were lower, the casting broader, and the energy more mature. Mugler finally felt like a brand again, not just a viral moment. That's why what happened next felt so abrupt. In early 2025, just months after showing that well-received collection, Mugler announced that Cadwallader was stepping down. There was no scandal, no public creative clash, just a quiet departure after nearly 7 years. It felt like a reset, but also a disruption. The brand had reclaimed cultural relevance, but not yet a clear identity. And now it was changing hands again. The new creative director was named weeks later, Miguel Castro Freitas. A Portuguese designer with a strong technical background and years of experience at Parisian houses, Freitas didn't arrive with hype or headlines. Internally, he was known for his precision and respect for Mugler's original codes, structure, silhouette, motion, but he wasn't a showman. His vision hasn't been made public yet, and his debut collection is set for spring-summer 2026. What he inherits is complex. Since 2020, Mugler has been owned by L'Oréal, a global beauty giant whose main revenue still comes from perfume, not fashion. So while the brand's cultural weight is undeniable, its commercial reality remains fragile. Freitas isn't just reviving a legacy. He's now expected to shape a fashion house that can survive and grow under a company whose primary interest may lie in the fragrance aisle. Mugler is globally recognized, beloved for its archive, and constantly referenced online. But it's also a brand that hasn't had stable creative direction in over 2 decades. The house is caught between past and present, known more for the things it once was than the things it could be. So, what do you think? Is Mugler really on the verge of a new era, or is this just nostalgia with better lighting? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.